city of Palm Springs was founded in 1938, and this year celebrates its 50th anniversary. They've also got 60 golf courses. But that's a different story and a different weekend. We're here for the Lincoln Mercury-sponsored Palm Springs Vintage Weekend. Hello, everyone. I'm Bruce Flanders, along with actress Susie COELHO. And Susie, there's a whole social aspect to this event, isn't there?
There sure is. This is actually going to be a love affair with cars this weekend. We're going to take you to an auction where there are cars going for over hundreds of thousands of dollars. I hear there's even one car that's valued over $1 million.
I'll take you to some former Formula One cars and Indianapolis-type cars that have been restored and run just about as fast now as they did then.
And how about a beauty pageant called the Concours d'Elegance? It's actually not a beauty pageant, but as far as I'm concerned, there are some of the most beautiful vintage cars in the world.
Little sports cars, if you like them, we've got them by the dozens, and some love affairs. These guys have restored them just amazingly well.
Now, if you're interested in Palm Springs and spending a wonderful weekend with us, I'm going to take you around Palm Springs, show you all the terrific places there are to go, so stay with us.
The Lincoln Mercury Palm Springs Vintage Grand Prix gets underway with an interesting pass through the paddock full of racing cars, sports cars, and the people who drive them. We're back right after this. Welcome back to the airport at Palm Springs, California, where the paddock area is full of activity as over 260 vintage automobiles undergo final preparation prior to the start of this weekend's racing event. This is a great opportunity for spectators and competitors alike to get a close-up view of some of the most famous names in the automobile world.
There is a wide variety of vehicles on display. Some need a helping hand just trying to get started, while others will never qualify for the latest version of four-wheel drive. Many colors, sizes, and shapes, but they all have one common heritage, the care and attention of a thoughtful owner.
Not only is the paddock full of famous cars, but famous stars as well. Dennis Hume, the New Zealander who captured the Formula One title in 1967. Sir Jack Brabham, three-time Formula One champion from Australia.
August up there.
America's George Follmer, winner of both the Trans Am and Can-Am titles in the past.
These final moments are spent attending to the inevitable checklist of last-minute details. Making sure that the internal mechanisms, as well as the external appearance, are carefully prepared.
Some of the entrants represent big buck efforts, out of whose full race transporter roll as many as 5 fully prepared racing machines. One such owner, Bibb Stillwell, explained his operation.
Oh yes, we've got 2 full-time professional race car mechanics, and they look after the cars full-time.
Now these cars are all based here in the United States?
Based in Tucson, Arizona.
And then you leg around to about how many different vintage meetings a year?
We did 20 race meetings this year, total, from Laguna Seca, Monterey, Sears Point up in the Napa Valley to Lime Rock in Connecticut.
Because it's going to happen. One of these cars is going to get injured. What do you have to do? Do you have to make brand new fresh pieces from scratch?
Well, they're custom-built cars in the first place. They're handmade, and if something does get broken or wears out, it's a matter of going to a good machine shop and fabricating it.
The entry list contains the names of Ferrari, Porsche, Maserati, Lola, and Old Yeller.
Last Old Yeller built, it was built by Max Belchowski in Hollywood. At that time, he would build you a brand new car for $4,500. The car was raced very successfully by Ronnie Bucknam, Bob Drake, Carroll Shelby. Elvis Presley drove the car in Spin Out, probably the most famous butt that ever sat in the car. It's a junkyard dog, and it has a Buick engine. It has a Jag transmission, Studebaker differential, Corvette rear suspension, a combination of Pontiac and Jag front suspension, and Max's own frame and body.
Auto racing has certainly had its share of famous families, but here's one with a twist, a father, mother, daughter combination.
This is my 9th season, and I've been driving Triumph Spitfires for the past 7 years, and we've been doing really well in the Spitfires. I've grown up in it. My parents both raced, and I just thought that was the way you grew up, racing.
So why do these owners come out here and spend their time and money racing and risking these valuable cars?
Well, it's a kind of a Walter Mitty thing. All of us have grown up with sports car racing and have always wanted to be a race car driver. For want of funds or want of guts or what have you, it wasn't possible. But now, with this low-key vintage racing and the cars becoming available once again, it provides kind of a venue for guys like us to get out and pretend we're Phil Hill or Sterling Moss and wave to the crowd and get the applause.
But vintage racing isn't just an exclusive domain for the wealthy. Take Richard Wiley, for example. They tell me you represent the everyman who effectively runs vintage racing.
That's right, that's me.
What is it you do for a living?
I sell neckties for the Farrell Reed Company in Boulder, Colorado.
Now, how many neckties does your lovely Lola represent?
Probably a few thousand, a few 100,000 as a matter of fact.
You having a good time this weekend?
Having a ball. It's a great race, good weekend, good people.
What kind of a budget do you look at?
I probably spend $10,000, $12,000 a year on it.
Is it worth it?
Oh, absolutely.
How many neckties do we have to sell to be back next year?
A few 100,000 more, and we'll do it.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome you to Palm Springs. My name is Hank Thorpe, and I'm the chief steward for this event.
Like their cars, each driver needs his own final preparation before venturing out on the track.
Is similar. For this event, we are going to have to operate under the theory of TCC, that is total car control. If you have total control of your car, it means that you will not spin and you will not touch anything or anybody else.
As the drivers slide into position behind the wheel, one famous name was missing: Bob Bondurant, ex-Formula One driver and current racing school owner. You were scheduled to drive a pretty exotic race car this weekend. What happened to you?
Well, Bruce, I was supposed to drive an 82 McLaren Formula One car, and I was waiting for it, you know, and I got up in the middle of the night, made a pit stop, came back to go to bed and walked straight into my coffee table and broke my toe. And I never knew a toe could be so painful. You know, it's the right foot. I sat in the car this morning to try and drive it, and you push on the brake and try and heel and toe, and you just can't do it. So I'm going to sit this one out, and Don Wasserman, who owns the car, will drive it, and I'll drive the pace car instead, I guess. I can manage that one.
For this vintage weekend, the pace car is a beautiful 1988 Lincoln Continental, and Bob Bondurant handling the driving chores. Behind him, 60s and 70s muscle cars called Trans Am, getting ready for our first race, and we'll be right back after this. To Palm Springs, California for the Palm Springs Vintage Weekend, and an enthusiastic crowd on hand on a beautiful weather day. Out on the racetrack, the final pace lap being taken right now by the Trans Am cars. Quickest qualifier was that 69 AMX or Javelin, Fernando Lozano, the driver of it. But this field includes a former Camaro of Mark Donahue and a Parnelli Jones Mustang and some Cougars and some GT350 Shelby cars and some great muscle cars. A lot of fun type of stuff about ready to go racing. Here it is, green flag, and we are underway with the event number 1 in the Trans Am racing. Now they come through a very narrow chicane right there, which reduces them to single file. Then a big left-hander here and go on to an airport runway. Lozano is in front, but there's a Mustang slightly out of shape and going off the course to the right. That's James Biddle in a Mustang GT350 that he's attempting to motocross with on the driver's right. Meanwhile, Lozano has the lead as Biddle gets back underway and shakes off a little bit of the desert sagebrush as he re-enters the race course. Lozano in front, clipping the apex quite well. The former Donahue Camaro that is driven today by Fred Galloway runs second. And sitting in the third place spot at the moment is the Ford Mustang. It's actually a 1970 Mustang driven by George Follmer, who won the Trans Am title in 1972. There's a good shot of Lozano working that AMC Javelin quite hard, going out onto the straightaway area and a big spread back to the second place. Second place is where the battle of the race is starting to take place, as the Camaro starts to feel the heat from George Follmer's Mustang. Mustang goes to the driver's left, inside, clips the apex well, and gets around that Camaro. Camaro looked a little rich there as he got out onto the straightaway once again. And Follmer, with the Ford product, in pursuit now of the Javelin.
Now, about how fast do you think these cars are going in the straightaways?
Well, Susie, they're probably worth about 120, 125 down the straightaways. The lap average for the fastest car was over 73 miles an hour. And there's some tight corners on this track that really do limit their overall speed. Follmer now all over the back of Lozano. Lozano had problems in practice trying to keep the tire temperatures up, even though it's a beautiful day. He said they weren't warm enough. Now he's feeling some heat. Follmer is leaving some heat on him. As they pass the start-finish line and come into the chicane, which was designed specifically to slow their overall speeds, they go down into turn number 1 of this 7-turn course. 1.1 miles around. They are right now on functioning runways that are used the rest of the year as taxiways here at the airport. But today they're closed down. You may be able to see some of the big airplanes landing in a little while. Right now, they are on the brakes, coming to a left-hander, off of the fastest portion of the course and now onto the manufactured portion, part of this racetrack that was built specifically 2 years ago for the vintage weekend. And there's some tight corners out there right now. Follmer still on the back of Lozano as the Javelin leads and the Ford Mustang pressures him hot and heavy. Right now, they're about to make a left-hand turn, one of the tighter ones, and come right in front of the VIP area.
Bruce, it's pretty warm out here today. Do you think the heat could be a factor for the driver or the car?
Well, Susie, if we were going 200 miles like they used to in the old days, it might certainly be a factor. But today, they're only going 15 laps, so it shouldn't matter that much. I think concentration will matter a lot more. Lozano in front as they come out onto the longest straightaway. And coming after him right now is George Follmer. And suddenly, the Mustang making a bunch of ponies and just thunders past the Javelin. So George Follmer, the former champion in this division in 1972, has taken back over the lead here today. And that 1970 Mustang that he's driving looks just as good today as it did then. It's never turned a wheel on the street. It's always been a race car. You know, we talked to George Follmer about what it was like to race this series in the good old days.
We raced very hard against the Camaro of Mark Donahue and the Roger Penske team. We had the Javelin team, and we had Dan Gurney's Dodge team, Plymouth. Sam Posey was driving then. Rick Gurney drove. Sweet Savage drove earlier. Just a lot of fantastic race drivers competed in the Trans Am in that era, and unfortunately, they've never been able to duplicate it.
Do you enjoy seeing some of your old buddies and some of the cars you drove from years ago?
Yeah, I think that's probably for the drivers. I mean, it's fun to get out and play with these old cars, but it's also nice to see the guys that you used to bang fenders with and race hard with, and for some reason, this event in Palm Springs is growing in stature with the vintage people.
Bruce, these cars look a lot like the production cars that were made in the 60s for regular street driving. Are these the same as those, or are these racing cars?
Well, actually, they all came down the same assembly line, except that these were made into dedicated racing cars and have been for about the last 15 years or so. Follmer, out in front of it, catches a little bit of the edge of the racetrack, always trying to find where the limits are when he runs that Mustang. And that looks to me like that piece underneath the front bumper is an addition since the 1970s. Follmer, once again, by the VIP area, coming down towards the checkered flag, and this time the checkered flag should wave for him as the laps are about done. A rather tentative checkered flag given to him, but now they seriously wave it at the rest of the field. We had an opportunity to ask George Follmer what it was like to race his old friend.
That car's always been good to me. I've won a lot of races in that car, so it's nice to win and one more.
On the victory stand, the winner, George Follmer, accepting the Holston beer from the Trans Am race sponsor. On the left is Fred Galloway, who caught third, and the second place driver on the right-hand side, Fernando Lozano. Get your checkbook ready, because we're about to take you to a very expensive car auction. Area of the Palm Springs Airport. The great range of vintage machines are undergoing final preparations, and soon it'll be time for them to match skill and effort as they compete in their respective classes. However, the races weren't the only highlights of the Lincoln Mercury Palm Springs Vintage Weekend.
Hey,
An international car auction featuring many of the same makes and models which will be racing here this weekend. There are classic cars attracting collectors as well as racers. We asked Rick Cole, organizer of the auction, where these buyers are coming from.
There will be bidders here tonight from Japan and Europe, and some phone bids too coming in. A person from Switzerland would be coming tonight to bid on exotic Ferrari automobiles, racing cars, and so forth. Due to the dollar situation, the market, it's somewhat cheaper to buy in the United States now than it is in Europe and other places, especially Japan, too.
When you say telephone bids, do you mean that there's actually people in Switzerland or Japan standing by their phones and with a direct line to you to bid on cars?
Yeah, we'll have 3 lines tied into the auction block tonight, plus several other lines in the office and a walkie-talkie system back and forth. Sometimes it happens that in a brief one-day sale like this, somebody won't actually fly in to bid on a car, but they will do it by phone, and it's common practice. We just take the car to the airport, put it on a plane, and off it goes.
Now, I think of people buying a car because it's beautiful and because they want to drive it, but that's not the case here.
It's not the case so much anymore because the prices of the cars have escalated. It's not something that's just happened. It's something that has been going on now for over a decade. The cars have been slowly creeping up in value, and they have beaten inflation just about every year. They've beaten 10, 12, sometimes 20%. These cars here behind us have doubled in price in the last year. So you've got a heavy, heavy interest in big money investors looking to these things to keep up or exceed anything that they're doing in the marketplace or in a bank account or what have you.
Well, now let me ask you about this Ferrari, because I love this car right here. What is the price of this car? What do you think it might go for? Or give me an idea of what the value might be. Can you do that?
This car is very special. It's a 1972 Ferrari Daytona. This particular car is unusual in the fact that it only has 750 original miles from new. And we're looking at the original paint, the original tires, the original interior. It's never been touched. It's only been waxed. And for somebody who collects Ferraris, this is the ultimate. I think new this car was somewhere around $22,000. I think tonight you would see a price in excess of $220,000.
So tell me a little bit about how the system actually works. Now we've got the car and we're driving it up to the podium or to the front, or do you want to give me a little details on how it works and the hand signals involved?
Can't really reveal hand signals, but all the cars are stored in one room down below, and each one will be driven into the ballroom on an individual basis. They're driven up on a turntable, and they're turned around and displayed before the public. Anybody attending an auction should realize that all the winking and the hand signals is really for television. That is not really what happens most of the time in the auction. Obviously with the auctioneer chanting and, 20, 30, 30, 40, 40, 40, 50, the average layman doesn't really understand what's going on. But we have service personnel around in tuxedos that will help anybody who wants to bid. But bid not to the auctioneer, but to one of the auctioneer's assistants. That's a big way to get in trouble, is to signal or wink to the auctioneer, and then you don't know really what's happening.
Now, when you talk about these reserve prices, what exactly does that mean? The person doesn't want to sell it for less than X amount of dollars?
Yeah, most of the auctions around the world, the consigners sell cars with a reserve price. That means the car cannot be sold for less than the price without their permission. But for instance, if a fellow had a $500,000 minimum on his car and the bidding got up to $425,000, the auctioneer would ask him if he wanted to sell at that price, and very often it happens that he will lower it.
Okay, one last big question. What kind of gross, money-wise, do you expect to probably pull in tonight, or what's your estimate?
I would probably say about $2.8 million. We'll see if I'm right.
Okay, we'll see if you're right. Good luck. The auction will offer 85 different automobiles, spanning the spectrum from the historic to the modern era.
And we have here 1978 turbo. It's 700 horsepower, and the car is one of the fastest cars in the state of California. First time it's been auctioned, and I'd like to get around $100,000 for the car.
The car is a 1938 Lagonda V12. It's the oldest car in the show, originally used by Mr. Winston Churchill during World War II as one of his staff cars. It has independent suspension, dual master cylinders, a lot of very innovative things for the time. It's the original carpeting, the original paint, the original chrome. Absolutely everything on the car is as it was in 1938.
And then it was time for the auction to begin. Leading off with the Lagonda of Winston Churchill, the bidding got off to a quick start. Collectors saw a rare opportunity to buy a piece of history, but eventually nostalgia had its limits.
All done. I'm going to close the bidding at $40,000, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to take more like $60,000 to buy the automobile. Do not get up.
But at this auction, the mark that would capture everyone's attention was the Ferrari.
1967 all over again, the 275 GT.
The excitement has been turned up a notch at this Rick Cole auction in Palm Springs. as the bidding commences on the evening's first Ferrari, a 1972 12-cylinder Daytona Coupe.
GTB Ford Daytona Coupe. Okay, what are we going to do? Open the mopping into the part. Now 180. 180. 182.5. Sold the automobile. $181,000.
The market's very, very strong on Ferraris. I used to be a dealer for Ferraris, and I bought the first Ferrari Daytona into the state of California, and it was red with a tan interior just like the one I bought.
How much did you pay for that first one that you brought in?
$24,500 in 1970.
And how much is that car going for today?
$181,000.
200,000 to 300,000 Blair. How about a 2 to 2.5? How about a 2 to 2.5 on it? How about a 2 to 2.5?
Then there was another star from the Ferrari stable, a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB.
235, 235, a bit 240, how about a bit 240, 250, 260, 260, 270, 275, 275, 280, 285, you're out. How about a bit 280, bid 85, how about a bit 280, bid 85, how about a bit 280,000, 282 and a half, 285, 287 and a half, 287 and a half, 290, 295, how about a bit, you got 295, Tim, and now 300,000, how about a bit 295, a bit 300, how about a bit 295, a bit 300,000, how about a bit 295, a bit 300, and all done, all through, how about a bit 295, a bit 3, the most desirable Ferrari made, how about a bit 295, a bit 300. Wait a minute. Man raised his own bid. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the man has raised his own bid from $295 to $300,000. I'm going to be 300 and now 10. Up. 305. I'm at $305,000. I'm going to be 305 and a bit 310. I'm going to be 305 and a bit 310. You all done? All through? 310,000.
We got 305.
310. 310.
But they still couldn't meet the reserve, and the exotic Ferrari was rolled off the floor. But behind the scenes, the bidding continued.
$15,000. Sold! Sold! Sold the last Ferrari, $325,000.
But not all of the cars went for hundreds of thousands of dollars. This 1966 Aston Martin DB6 was claimed for about the price of the average new car.
$15,259,500.
You just bought 3 cars. You seemed like a happy man each time around.
Sure. We got them cheap, you know, and we can sell them if we want to, or I can race them. I'm a race driver. I race vintage cars and have been doing for a number of years.
So you actually feel like you got a good deal here tonight?
Oh, yeah. I got the sleepers.
800,000, bid 900,000, 900.
But it was the end product of Henry Ford's multi-million-dollar dream that elicited the highest bids of the evening. A 1967 Ford Gulf Mirage Le Mans race car. And the bidding started at $500,000.
50,000 is bid. 900,000, and what do you say, sir? 8.5 to bid 9. Kitten, what's he say? The automobile, first time ever offered for sale at public auction, will take $2 million to purchase the automobile. Well, it's not too many auctions you can go to where you can say, I saw a car that they want $2 million for. And it's a Ford.
And then there was the car you could have bought new for a little over $2,000. How much do you think it's going to go for?
It's hard to say. It really is. You know, I know what I have in it. I've spent over 50 grand on the car, so it's one of a kind.
So I take it it's going to go for at least over 50 grand.
Probably a lot more than 50, I hope. If it doesn't, probably go home.
$20,000 spent on the drive.
The crowd couldn't resist the chance to catch a memorable glimpse of yesterday.
$40,000 on it. How about a bid 30,000? Not a bid, a bid 40. The car is worth a lot more than that. I'm going to bid 30,000. 55,000 if you're interested. An absolutely gorgeous automobile. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen.
But tonight, this memory was asking too steep a price.
Let's give him a hand.
This one got more oohs and ahs when it was driven in than any other car. Now, why do you think it didn't sell?
It just wasn't the right people, probably. More sports car oriented. So it's like, but I wanted to try it and see.
Now, this gentleman next to us has been eyeing this car for hours. Now, why did he not buy it?
Because he wants too much. I've been trying to buy the car from him at least 3 months actively and probably 2 years since I've seen the car. But it's never looked this good. I mean, every time I see it, he does something else to it and he wants more money. This he just showed me tonight because it wasn't on there last time I saw it. When you turn the radio on, the antennas go up and down. I mean, every time this guy does something to the car, he raises, they go up and down at the same time. That was my shocker for the evening on this car.
And finally, the spotlight shone on the 1972 Ferrari Daytona Coupe.
Collectible cars of all the Ferraris. I got 240, 245, 240 pounds, it ought to give me 45. 245 pounds, it ought to give me 45 pounds, it ought to give me 245. 240 pounds, $1. 245. 240 pounds, it ought to give me 245. Got it. Now 250. 245 pounds, $1. 250 pounds, $1. Now 55. 250 pounds, it ought to give me 55. So,
But this buyer wasn't even in the audience. The bid came by phone.
it goes to Ben Switzerland.
The totals for the evening, 54 cars sold for $2.5 million. We're coming back to the Palm Springs Airport for some vintage sports car racing you'll love. COELHO, and we're here at the Lincoln Mercury Vintage Grand Prix on a gorgeous Palm Springs day. Of the 1988 Lincoln Continental Pace car, we get a close-up view of the vintage race cars from the 1920 to the 1950 era, featuring such famous names as Allard, MG, and Fraser Nash. In addition to the feature races, there were 10 other groups in action this weekend, ranging from small-bore production cars to exotic racing machines. Included in this particular category were the beautiful silhouettes of the Can-Am cars from the 60s and the 70s, including this rather nice example of a 1970 Lowland. Now, these cars were some of the most powerful racing cars of all time and featured this weekend in the Payne-Weber Can-Am Vintage Race.
Each group, there is a wide variety of car types competing. We asked the individual responsible, Cliff Jones, how he arrived at these classifications.
We race cars built through 1969 for street cars and through 72 for race cars. And we basically split them into 3 broad categories. Street cars, modified or unmodified, race cars with fenders, and race cars without fenders. And then we subdivide them further according to their age, their weight, and their cubic capacity, and if they've been modified or not. And it ends up with some very mixed-looking groups, but the racing's usually pretty even, because if one fella does a lot better than he ought to do, we just bump him up a class for the next race.
The hospitality suite area is full of VIPs taking in all the action. And we asked one of them, Catherine Hellman, a star of Who's the Boss, her reason for coming to Palm Springs.
We came down one weekend at a friend's suggestion.
Chuck, you into getting into a race car?
Well, I think everybody on the track would probably...
For the most part, the racing competition was neat and tidy. But there were occasions when the competitors forgot Chief Steward Thorpe's call for TCC, Total Car Control. And at times, the biggest challenge for the drivers was to keep the car off the wall. There were moments when the Palm Springs desert claimed a victim, if only temporarily. This 1932 Morgan could have used its own version of a 3-wheel drive.
Neglecting the rest of the race, but there's no question that the race for the lead in this particular...
That junkyard dog, Old Yeller, distinguished itself by charging to the lead in the C Sports and GT class for cars over 2 liters. And under the approving eye of designer and builder Max Bauchowski, captured the checkered flag.
Candace ELSEBUSCH in the 1967 Triumph Spitfire. In the father-mother-daughter team, she was the top qualifier in her Class D sports cars and sat on the pole, although she was passed by several of the bigger engine cars going to the green flag. As the event progressed, she still managed to finish a very respectable 6th place. Beautiful cars were everywhere, like this mid-engine, mid-seater Porsche 356. This is what's really meant by vintage racing. Cars from every era, in all shapes and sizes. And each one in its day tasted glory. And now they're competing again. If Americans have an ongoing romance with the automobile, then here's a parade of old memories. But hosting the Vintage Grand Prix did not stop the operation of the modern Palm Springs Airport, which is served by 6 major airlines as well as smaller commuter planes. But as cars and planes shared parallel paths, everyone enjoyed the show of speed, color, and style. For vintage racing isn't as much about winning as it is about driving and displaying cars that pay homage to the history of motorsports. Beautiful cars. And some of the ways people play. Spring. Up next.
Colorful setting, majestic environment, breathtaking motor cars, and admiring crowd. Mix well and you have all the necessary ingredients for an outstanding concours d'elegance in Palm Springs.
Now, Susie, this is my favorite car.
Oh, it's a beauty.
1937 Lincoln Zephyr.
Good, solid, American-made car.
Under the hood, a V12.
I could see cruising down the road in this.
And only 770 miles on the odometer.
It's a beauty.
Plus, there's room for luggage in the back.
Well, that helps.
Now, Susie, can you imagine having this car call for you? Right now, I've got the owner of this very beautiful Packard, Mr. Chip Connor. And Chip, you actually haven't owned this car very long, have you?
No, I haven't, Bruce. I've had the car for just about 9 months now.
And when you got it, was it in this good a shape?
It was in this good a shape. Yes, it was.
If you could put a fair market value on it right now, what would you consider it's worth?
I would guess under $200,000 and probably over $150,000.
Do you drive it? I mean, do you take it out and whip it through the neighborhood at all?
I would like to, and when its showing days are over, I'm sure that I will do it. Right now, I'm so afraid of hurting what I consider to be a marvelous automobile that I prefer to keep it on very nice lawns and very nice settings like Palm Springs.
Chip, you're also the proud owner of this very beautiful Cord, too. Now, this one, you went through the painful part of the restoration yourself.
Yes, I did. It was a very enjoyable project, very time-consuming.
To us on ESPN, this car is a bit of a novelty because we have seen the race car driver Chris Cord win several events on ESPN, and it was his grandfather that designed it, but you're probably more familiar with the history than I.
Well, it's a very unusual car. It was one of the first front-wheel drive cars ever made, virtually won every concours and salon in 1929.
Now, let me put you on to the retail value, a guess. What do you think this is worth?
I would like to think it's worth at least what I have invested in this car to make it the way it is today. But I would conservatively estimate it's worth about $110,000 to $120,000.
Now, again, I'm going to ask you, have we gone out and played with this one on the road since we restored it?
As a matter of fact, I have. When the car was purchased, it was unrestored, so I didn't feel guilty about getting behind the wheel, grinding the gears, turning the steering wheel, and going through red lights.
In a Concours d'Elegance of this size, it takes an awful lot of judges, approximately 20. And I'm standing with Ted Otasic, one of the judges, and it's not a fun job, or is it, Ted?
Sure, it's a fun job. Get to meet a lot of nice people, and you get to see all these beautiful cars. But it's also work.
When you look at a car and you judge them on a 100-point scale, has there been a 100-point car here?
No, I don't believe there's a 100-point car here. It'd be kind of difficult to get up to 100 points.
What is the biggest point loss when a person was to enter one? What goes away and costs you the most?
I would say it'd be dirt.
Just anywhere?
Just anywhere.
Ted, if you were to pick the most outstanding, what would it be?
Well, if the camera could turn around the other way, I'd sure pick the red Ferrari behind it.
You're the proud owner of this Daytona Spider behind us. It's a beautiful car. Did you get it in this kind of condition?
No, I bought it about 2 years ago, and it was pretty run down. And we had it restored and completely stripped, and everything was completely rebuilt. including the top and the leather and the engine and suspension and everything about the car.
Now, do you drive this car around, or is it strictly for show?
No, frankly, it's just for show. It's so good I can't even sit in it.
How much is this car worth?
Well, the Ferrari market's been going up, I would say, in the area of $850,000 to $1 million.
Bruce, what do you think? I found it, my favorite car.
A Mercedes, huh?
It's not just a Mercedes. This is a 1956 Mercedes Gullwing.
Beautiful.
There was only 1,400 of these made.
What a beautiful engine compartment.
It's a pretty expensive vehicle, too. I don't know if we could afford it. But there is one extra.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. Free luggage.
Though the job must have been difficult, Judge Ted Otasic and his colleagues made their rounds and determined which of these exquisite cars would be honored as the winners of the Concours. But not everyone came away with a trophy.
The car we're looking at right now is a 1923 Triumph. Gary Robley is the owner of it, and Gary, the judging has now been completed, and you didn't end up a winner.
No, I didn't.
But it's a beautiful car.
I enjoy showing it.
How often do you show this car then a year?
I've showed it 6 times this year.
There's a whole social aspect to a weekend like this that seems like everybody just enjoys it.
Well, it's a lot of fun meeting the people that enjoy a car like this, since it's the only one in the world.
But these stylish automobiles are not the only first-class vehicles on display this weekend.
One of the things that you enjoy in this coach is when you're in the coach, you're not aware that it was at one time a chassis for a bus, because you see no dashboard or cockpit or anything of that nature. It's like a condominium or your private railroad car. This particular coach has all electric heat, and it has all hot water heat. You have 3 high-end entertainment centers, one for the driving area, and one for the main coach, and one for the library convertible bedroom in the rear. We have more electronics than the average house. We have a bath and a half, a living room, a dining room, bedroom. It's just, everything you'd have at home. It rides better than any vehicle, any limousine, anything in the world. It's all there suspended. You hardly know you're moving.
Back to the Lincoln Mercury Palm Springs Vintage event. And now it is time for the Victory Lane Magazine Formula One race, which is actually comprised of some of the most exotic cars of the weekend, both the former Indianapolis cars and the former Formula One cars. Some rather exotic pieces of equipment and pretty exotic drivers. There's George Follmer, and that is Sir Jack Brabham, and next to him, Denny Hume. Boy, there's some high-mileage experts in this field. Lighting them off and getting ready to go behind the pace car for the warm-up portion of the activity. What a neat-looking field of racing cars, spanning probably 3 different decades of Formula One and Indy cars. The pace car bringing them around at a rather slow tempo for these type of vehicles. And as they bring them around this next time, we should be looking at a green flag. In fact, there it is. Green flag is waving, and now they've all got to try and get through that narrow chicane. This is an instant traffic jam. Apparently, everybody gets through it okay, and Scooter Patrick is out in front. Now, Patrick behind the wheel of a 1970 March 701, and he's got a good couple of car lengths over, it looks like George Follmer in the second place spot, in the UOP Shadow. Boy, that one used to be in every car magazine during its racing era. And right behind him, in third, that looked like Mark Walicachuk, probably the youngest driver in the field. He's driving a 1969 McLaren M4B from about the era that he was born. Good look at Follmer there, our former Trans Am winner this weekend, looking good in that shadow. And back on Patrick, the leader, as he comes through the VIP area. And Walicachuk has taken over the second place spot, dropping Follmer to third with Lance Mist right on his tail. Mist driving a 72 Lola 330.
I wonder why some of these cars have really big wings and air scoops, is that what you call them, and others don't have anything.
Well, obviously, Susie, there's an advantage. The bigger the wing, the better the car is going to stick in the corner. But again, we're watching 3 different decades of racing cars go by, and depending upon the regulations that were in force at the time, that's how big the wing is allowed to be. Boy, there's a good battle. Denny Hume followed by Sir Jack Brabham, 2 former world champions in Formula One, going at each other here at Palm Springs this weekend. Now, we had the opportunity earlier to speak with both of these gentlemen about what their current activities are.
So I did retire in 74 until 1978, a period of 4 years, and now I consistently race in Australia and New Zealand in what we call Group A touring car races. They're V8, 500 horsepower, monsters and run on road circuits and street circuits. And so I am still competitive. I still do it as a hobby on weekends. So this is it's not really a novelty to me.
Well, I go to 3 or 4 meetings a year and keep an interest in it, and I still have an interest in the engine side, but not in the chassis side.
We've asked a lot of different drivers. When you go to put the helmet on today, I know that inside of you the blood still boils of a race car driver who wants to win, but what type of an attitude do you have to take on a weekend like this?
Well, it's nice to get back in the car and have a feel of it, and I'm sure that, you know, I'm not going to just hang around looking at the crowd.
Three-time Formula One world champion and the only knighted driver in our racing field today, driving a 1970 Brabham BT33. But right now, we're focusing on the second-place car, and that's the UOP Shadow that George Follmer is driving. He's getting some pressure from behind him at the moment. And I think Scooter Patrick has just broken there on the straightaway, and they all just motor by Scooter as he coasts on down. And we have a new leader. The youngest driver in the field, Mark Walikachuk, leads it. But coming after him is George Follmer. George would like to make it a double-win weekend. Walikachuk, driving a 1969 McLaren M4B, just got past there. In fact, they tell me that Walikachuk has gone off onto 3 cylinders and is not making as much horsepower as he did in the first couple of laps. So Follmer in control.
I'm curious about the gasoline that these cars burn. Is it the same gas that we use in our street cars?
Well, Susie, those that do burn gasoline are actually burning racing gasoline well over 100 octane, and the former Indy cars are running methanol. Picking up the leader once again, and it is George Follmer in that Shadow. The Shadow, by the way, was built in 1973, and right on his tail is the youngest guy in the field, Mark Walikachuk. Running in third is Lance Nist. Out onto the back straightaway goes our leader, George Follmer, who already won the Holston Beer Trans Am, and now he's trying to wrap up the Victory Lane Magazine Formula One race. Uh-oh, looking out. That's an 82 March that has some serious damage to the left front, but apparently everybody is okay. The leader, once again, George Follmer with the Shadow, heading by on this 15-lap long go, much shorter than the 2 hours that they normally run a Formula One style race. And as he comes up to lap some of the traffic, it looks like he's coming up on Sir Jack Brabham. By the way, Jack Brabham in a car that he built in 1970, the BT33. And there has turned out to be a heck of a battle for the second-place spot. Number 41, the red car, Lance Nist, has gotten around number 114, Mark Walikachuk. Walikachuk then is relegated to the third-place position with about a half a lap yet to go in this competition. Back on the leader, and George Follmer bringing the Shadow ever so carefully around the last couple of corners, about ready to put a lap on Denny Hill. Headed for the checkered flag in the Victory Lane Magazine Formula One race. Quite a weekend for George Follmer. And we asked him what it was like to be back in the Shadow again.
It's been my car from the day it's made, and I've had a lot of seat time in it, but this is the first race it's ever won.
Does it feel just as good to win this one as any of the others?
Oh, it's nice to drive the Formula One car again. You know, you go on to other things and you race other kinds of cars, but something this special and this unique, it's always nice to get back in it.
Somehow, that sums up the whole weekend. Special and unique. As George Follmer accepts the victory wreath from Dewey Dillinger of Victory Lane Magazine, and the photographers snap their shutters. On your left is Lance Nist, who was second overall. George Follmer in the center, and on the far right-hand side, Mark Walikachuk. Boy, what a show these guys did put on. Now it's time to pass out the bubbly, which in this particular instance is rarely drunk. It's usually just sprayed on each other. We'll be back.
Itself has now ended, and the Lincoln Mercury-sponsored Palm Springs Vintage Weekend is drawing to a close as they load them on the trailer. And Susie, we have to say goodbye to all of these neat people and beautiful cars.
That's right, Bruce, and I'm pretty sad about that because at the auction the other night, I fell in love with this red Ferrari. And now that I'm sitting in this Maserati, I just can't make up my mind between this car and that car.
It seemed like you had a pretty good time at the Concours d'Elegance.
Oh, I really did. All dressed up in my beautiful hat.
Vintage cars, racing stars from the past, and terrific weather here in Palm Springs. For ESPN, I'm Bruce Flanders.
And I'm Susie COELHO.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.